Today, we're going to be talking about co-op conversions. This is a part of our Cooperative Foundations workshop and it's brought to you by Cooperation STL.
hmm
Let's hit up our next slide.
Yeah, and this is part of our, I should just said, like a cooperative foundations workshops. So that's alongside the intro to co-ops and how to start a new co-op, which will be our next one. I think if we're not repeating the intro to co-ops first, but we should be having an intro to co-ops at some point later in the year too, like we had earlier this year. We can do next slide. I guess I should first mention that we have the skill shares. We had a really nice skill share about cooperative chicken coop over at Zondi's place, where at Hidden Alley Ranch. So that was really fun, great for the kids. Hopefully, plan similar events in the future. And then we also have co-op talks where we go a little bit more in depth into these various topics, where in more of like a practice form, yeah, more of a detailed practice formula. And I can introduce the three of us. I'm Chris Wilcox. My pronouns are he, him. And
I'm Jenny. My pronouns are she, her.
My name is Zondi Barrett. My pronouns are she, they, and I'll be on tech tonight and also monitoring the chat.
yeah, so, if anyone, can come off mute, feel free to do so to ask questions throughout. Otherwise, you don't have to wait for a particular segment to ask a question or make a comment in the chat. Zondi will be monitoring those as we go. So yeah, for folks who are in right now, if you feel comfortable with it, you can type your name, and your group affiliation as applicable, your pronouns, and what's your favorite local business to kind of start us thinking about what co-ops could be exist here.
Like facilitators, I know we just introduced ourselves and our pronouns, but we should put our favorite local business in there for sure.
hmm I like that one bubble tea place right outside the Metrolink station for the convention center, but I'm forgetting the name of it right now. It's pretty good.
Cube tea.
Yes, that's it.
Then we also have Pam, she, her with Garrity Tools is here with us. Um, Jenny says local harvest. I love Pizza Hut. I could go and eat their dairy with vegan pepperoni pretty much every day.
Yeah, so here's a little overview of the will do's, might do's, and won't do's to set what our agenda is and kind of what the extent and limitations of this workshop are going to be for today. So the will do, so we will discuss the benefits of converting a company to a worker-owned co-op, present the basic steps you would need to do to convert to a worker co-op and use a local example from our good friend Jenny here about how this can be done with her practical experience. And for the might do, so we can elaborate on concepts based on participant questions. So, again, feel free to add in the chat if you want to maybe go a little bit deeper with a specific question on any of these topics that we discussed today. And we won't do so. We won't go in depth about how you can convert to your specific business. We're keeping this fairly general. That is something that we can help folks do if you like to get more engaged with Co-op STL. But this is a more general workshop for introductory purposes. And we'll not provide a way to convert a co-op that works for all because it's very, it's all context sensitive. It's going to be different from every type of business or even and also every type of co-op because there are co-ops besides like worker co-ops and worker self-directed nonprofits, which we are primarily focusing on today, particularly worker cooperatives. And go to the next slide. So we can start with our community agreements. So these are based on our the three of us and what we've thought were good guidelines for guiding our discussions and presentations, as well as taking in input from folks who have come to our workshops in the past. Um, and oh, we got something from Pam. It's like her favorite business.
For favorite business, we have Monstera Mezcaleria Bottle Shop on Grand. It focuses on and promotes agave spirits and small agave farming and mezcal producers all over Mexico, similar to single origin coffee bean farming.
Mm,
And so similarly, also Comet Coffee is also another great business.
interesting. Are you talking about the bow or is it a just a bow place? I'm curious because I've heard of it. I heard good things about it. Oh, is it a bow place or a specific one?
Oh, it's a bottle shop.
Oh, okay. My
Misheard
mistake.
that word. Yeah. They sell tequila and mezcal.
Oh, cool.
Mezcal.
Cool.
Yeah. Agave spirits.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good title. But yeah, so these are community agreements that we put together so far. So the first one is like no one knows everything. Together we know a lot. So the whole part of our, building this relationship and putting these on is we're all learning more. We're sharing what we know about cooperatives and what we want to put out into the world and in terms of helping people make new cooperatives a reality, especially with ones like this. Be curious and open. So we want to encourage folks to ask any questions come to mind, not worry about whether it's a stupid question or anything like that. Um, we want to be open for anyone who wants to learn in any way that they learn best. Speak from your own experience and related to that. So can't necessarily speak for someone else's experience. We can talk about different case studies and things like that, but ultimately we can only present people's things from our perspective and, respect that, also help us learn when people who attend our workshops also share their own experience that helps to add to the quality of our programming over time. Taking space and making space. So why am I talking? So that's a prompt to think about, is there to, not just listen to respond, but also to, to make sure that you're adding something to the conversation when you are speaking, not just repeating what someone else said. So and also like, why am I not talking? So if, other folks are participating and, you're not participating yet, or you haven't asked a question, or we want to encourage people to engage as much as possible. So let everyone have space and to let everyone have space and feel welcome in sharing their perspective and asking questions. And we can't be articulate all the time. So, giving people the benefit of the doubt and ask those questions. So yeah, just encourage people to engage with each other in good faith, and assume that, people don't have ill intentions. Maybe if someone has said something that, is hurtful to someone for a reason, for one reason or another, just we can, work that out and assume, that we're all trying to help each other, but also correct our, any behaviors or um, things that are hurtful to people so that we can all communicate better and make this space accessible for everyone. And related is confidentiality. Don't use specifics if you don't have permission or don't want them to be shared later, as we are recording this. And um, so this will be up on our YouTube when it's ready. And yeah, so we want to be able to share this with everybody and also respect the privacy that people want to have beforehand. You can go to the next slide. So put your thumbs up in the chat for any of these prompts. So how do you operate currently? Let's say you're an employee at a business or a nonprofit, or you have a business or a nonprofit. How does it operate currently? And So if you could give like a thumbs up for any of these things that apply to you, is it, more than just one owner and finance team that sees financial reports and knows about company finances? So how open are the finances and all those records? Got that for Jenny, certainly. I'd say probably all three of us because we do that with each other as co-op STL. Like the second one would be, do we have pay transparency? So does everybody in the business or nonprofit, do they know what each other are paid? Is that open knowledge between everyone? Is that, or is that something that people don't necessarily know about each other within the workplace? Hmm.
We're gonna get a lot of thumbs up to these questions because Pam and I both work at Garrity Tools, which is a worker-owned co-op.
Overlap, yeah. Yeah, and people who aren't managers, are they consulted about big company decisions? Do we take everyone, who isn't, in the day-to-day like administrative role or managing people or has authority over people? Does everyone get some input on those big company decisions that matter in the grand scheme?
We do our in the screen in our videos.
Yep.
Thumbs up. What's our last question?
And how many different people's work do you have a big impact on the success or has a big impact on the success of your business? So, what is everybody, in addition to being included in those decisions, is their day-to-day input important for the success of the business and how it runs? Go in the next. Um, and so if you said yes to any of those, then worker ownership is you're already on the path towards worker ownership. And if not, well, these are things we can get people to think about and consider and make your business a more like a co-op. So, what does it take to be a worker-owned cooperative? So, workers purchase the company, they control it. Decisions are made by all the worker owners after the sale is made. Governance, the new structures are in place. There are new ways to organize worker owners and collect and respond to the opinions in order to make decisions and get things done. So it's important, as Jenny will get into with the pre-work, to already, well, with the pre-work and preparation to already know how it's going to run when it is formally a co-op while before you finish that process so that you get it running as smoothly as possible. And operations, what are the new ways of organizing your day-to-day activities that might emerge? Maybe not something that you know right away without having that experience of being worker owners yet and not quite knowing how you're going to be working together and dividing tasks, responsibilities, authorities, and everything like that. So, this is all of this is going to be an iterative process. So at the beginning we try to anticipate conflict and work out, what are ways that we can work best together and make decisions equitably. And then just learn as you go along how to do it better. And so why become worker owned? Well, we believe that there's a lot of important benefits to having more worker owned businesses and for your business to be worker owned. They're generally more economically resilient. So the trends are, there's lots of data over the years where the economic downturns that co-ops tend to do better and last longer during those times. The big example that here in domestically is Cleveland, Evergreen Cooperatives. They're one of the few back in 2020 when the recession was hitting related to the onset of COVID-19. They were one of the few businesses that were still growing and they were still acquiring new businesses for co-op conversions, much like we're talking about today. And one of the reasons for that is that workers are more invested. So, this is their business. They're incentivized to, to produce because they directly benefit from what it is that they produce. They are not alienated in the way that, a worker might otherwise, where they don't get to control the product of their labor and sell it themselves. Their decisions benefit from diverse perspectives. So at first, we might think that, oh, well, it's difficult with everyone making decisions, but in the long run, we know that we have different perspectives that tends to lead to better decisions. And so, that is one of the strengths that a co-op has over maybe a typical business where maybe one or very few people are making these decisions and taking their experiences into account. And prioritize long-term stability. It doesn't make sense to close your business if you can avoid it, because why would you lay yourself off? These are your jobs. People also often live in the communities that they work in. They want business and all these exchanges and the benefits that happen between neighbors to work and continue and to grow. So, people will generally, you're not gonna get like an investor pulling all of their investments out as soon as the return goes down. People will generally find ways. And, one good example to think of is if you look in our workbook, we talk about the Marcora law in Italy, and that was allowing people to use their unemployment benefits to purchase a business and convert it to a co-op. And studies have generally shown that those businesses are just as high, if not more, survival rate, which is really good considering that presumably they were being laid off because there was some problem at the business, or it wasn't profitable, or it was experiencing a downturn. So there's a lot of good evidence to show that they're resilient and likely to continue the benefits both to themselves and their community in the long run. And it creates ownership opportunities for people who experience systemic exclusion. One very common trend in cooperatives are cooperatives run by people who have been impacted by the criminal legal system. That of course, people in that situation will face a lot of discrimination. Even in the cases where, we've banned the box, people find ways to discriminate anyway. So one nice thing about cooperatives is they create brand new opportunities for people to make their own wealth and to share that wealth collectively and build on it. So it provides opportunities where they don't otherwise exist. And so what about your interests in worker ownership? So the folks who are attending now, so feel free to share in the chat, what brought you to the workshop today? What interested you? What was the thing that got you to register and, and or even, watch this video when it comes out later to think about what brought you here?
In the chat, we have someone saying that they were initially interested in worker ownership because of shared responsibilities, and being able to disperse the stress of owning a company amongst more than just maybe the owner or a small group of owners.
Which, is one that I like too, because sometimes people are a little apprehensive. Well, what if I'm not ready for that responsibility? But the great thing about a cooperative is you are sharing that responsibility, and so that's a great benefit to operating as a co-op. And so if we talk about, so we would argue in here, as we're talking about how to convert businesses to co-ops, that they have benefits both for the current owners and for the worker owners, as they make that transition. So we can start with some of the next slide with the benefits for the owners. So it's a way to retire. If you are, if you own a business that, you run yourself, eventually you want to retire. And this is a way to, if there isn't a current successor to the business, you have to sell it to someone. So why not sell it to the workers? And, this way you can share the joys and challenges of owning a company, including up to and including making money, but all the other various benefits of being able to profit from your own labor and share your products and services with the world and stabilize your business and workforce. So, like we previously said, the co-ops tend to be resilient. They succeed or fail like other businesses, but they have a pretty good track record of sticking around in the community, especially compared to other businesses when things start hit. We have downturns in the economy. And of course, the end goal is to have benefits for the workers. It builds wealth in a way that you wouldn't normally be able to with just getting a wage. As the business grows, so does the benefit of the worker owners. So their success is directly connected to their labor. They have a say in decisions that affect you and your work. So unlike maybe in a typical situation, all of the workers have more of a democratic control over their workplace. They have direct input. They can bring their experience to best benefit the entire operation because we would think that people who are carrying out producing the goods and services they know how to best produce those, and everyone benefits from that expertise, and it creates job investment and security. Yeah, that you're not going to be laid off or fired in an unexpected way because you are making the decisions for the business. So there's not going to be a surprise where someone gets from this part in the United States, we have at-will employment, so people can be fired for any reason or no reason at all. So the thing about worker cooperative is that you would make agreements so that these things are happening for a reason, and you have an input on how to best preserve those jobs and you know how to best to preserve the quality of jobs going forward. So I'm going to switch it off to Jenny to talk about her personal experience in converting Garrity Tools to a cooperative.
Sweet. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, hopefully that kind of gave everybody like a good overview of, yeah, like why do this, and the benefits of it. And I'm going to get into a little bit more of the nitty-gritty of like the step by step. As we said at the beginning of the presentation, there really isn't like a silver bullet for like how you should convert your business to a worker-owned co-op. It's very specific to the type of business you have, who's working there, how big your workforce is, all those details. So the sort of outline that I put together of kind of our step by step is a very general one, and hopefully you can find how your business organization might fit into here. But there's sort of four components that I identified. One is pre-work and education. This is really where we would start the process, and it's about learning about co-ops so that you can figure out the best structure or how to approach a co-op for your specific business. So that can include just learning about other co-ops, just general foundational knowledge if you're at the very beginning of your sort of co-op journey. And we start there, but that also is going to continue on throughout the process and then even after you've converted to a co-op. The next thing that you'll sort of pick up and want to get going on is creating a new governance structure. So as you begin to understand and gain knowledge about how co-ops work, you can also begin to build out a structure for how your co-op should work. So you might be taking different components and different ideas from the way other places are structured and building out a new governance structure for your business. And then alongside that, you're also going to need to figure out your sales structure and financing. So when you convert an existing business to a co-op, the new ownerships, the new worker owners need to purchase the business from the previous owner. So figuring out how that's going to work and then also how you're going to pay for it. And the end point to that is executing your sale. So buying the company and then also implementing your new operating agreement. That one, that's basically your new governance structure for the company. Once that's done, we are still continuing our education. So we're still going to be taking time to learn how to operate well within this new structure. So that's our big overview. And we're going to dive into each of these steps with some more specifics and give the example of how this went down at Garrity Tools. So we can go to the next slide. Oh, but first, we have a question, which is wondering where people are on their journey to convert to a co-op. So, if you started this, if you're in it, thinking about like what point you're in. And it could also potentially be that you're like, I'm in, I'm actually in one, two, and three right now. Like, I'm doing all of that. Or maybe you're just in five because you're continuing your education. But this could help, I think, for folks to consider kind of like where they're at, so that when we're on these different sections, you might be able to pull some extra helpful information from there. So think about kind of where you're at. For me, I'm at five with Garrity Tools, but I think like Co-op STL, we're at two because we're a volunteer organization and we're trying to formalize our structure. So Zandi is helping us create bylaws for our organization. So we're kind of like one and two right now. Cool. We can go to the next slide. So, as I mentioned, I'm going to be talking about this through the lens of Garrity Tools journey. So that's sort of our case study. To give everyone some context for that, Garrity Tools is a manufacturer of pottery tools. So in this photo in this slide, we make little pieces of wood that shape clay. You can see this is our Texture 9 tool. You can press clay into it on the wheel and it makes this really cool vessel. We have a ton of different designs and we sell them all over the world to ceramicists and potters. A little bit about our journey, and for context too, we sell direct to customers online through our website, and then we also sell to retailers. So we sell bulk orders to ceramic supply shops that then resell our tools direct to consumer. Those are kind of the two ways we get our tools out there. In 2018, Colin Garrity, hence Garrity Tools, he started the company and was the sole proprietor of the company. And in 2020 was when we began to discuss what it would look like to become a worker-owned cooperative. And then we transitioned to a worker-owned cooperative in April of 2022. So the company was pretty young when we started those discussions, but it did take a few years to get to the point where we actually made that transition. So as we're talking about this in a case study, remember that all these things are happening over years. And for some businesses, it might go faster and some it might take longer. It just kind of depends on where you're at. So we'll go to the next slide. So we're going to talk about pre-work first. So this is that step when you're sort of figuring out what's going on. The best place I think to start with pre-work is education. So learning and reading together. If you come to this, if you're at a company and you're already super familiar with co-ops, that is awesome because you can bring a lot of knowledge to the table. But my guess would be that not everyone at that company is super familiar with co-ops. So it's also really important if you're considering making this transition to kind of get as many people as possible to be more familiar with the structure of co-ops, the benefits, so that when you're ready to actually like make this transition, a lot of people have kind of are excited and on board with it. So education is really important, and this could be like basic foundations, like what different types of co-ops are there. I'd recommend there's a bunch of resources on our website for a lot of different basic foundational information. And we also have our workbook. Co-op STL is a workbook that kind of describes the different types of co-ops and things like that. That could be a great resource for working through this together with your teammates. Zandi is very lovely, Vanna Whiting, our co-op workbook right now. The other important thing during this pre-work phase is to talk to the person that owns the company about this idea. Because you could do all this work, you get really excited about becoming a co-op, but if the owner isn't willing to sell the company to the owners or to the workers, then it's a little bit mute. And I was looking at this because I went through this process from a worker perspective, but this could also be a time when maybe the pre-work is actually the owner doing this pre-work. The owner is interested in converting to a co-op. So that would be not only from one side, worker talking to owner, like, hey, would you be interested in this idea? It could also come to the other side, the owner being like, hey, workers, would you guys be interested in me selling you the company? But starting to have those conversations and see if they're interested in converting to a worker-owned co-op and selling the company to that new ownership group. And then other thing, accountability. So it's helpful to identify someone at this point, or a group of people, maybe a committee, depending on the size of your organization, that will be accountable for moving the process forward. That's going to be really important because it is a lot of work to do this, to make this transition. And so having someone who, it doesn't mean that they're doing all the work, but is sort of that checkpoint person to be like, okay, this is our next step. This is the input we need. I'm going to gather it. We're going to move forward. Can be really helpful. So we'll go to the next slide. So what this looked like at Garrity Tools. This is a picture of our team that was at our company at the time that we were having these discussions and making this conversion. After a very long day of sanding tools, we're covered in sawdust, if you cannot tell. Um, when we started the sort of pre-work phase, it began with me learning what co-ops were. So I was not super familiar with cooperatives. When heard co-op, I was like, oh, grocery store. But I was reading a book at the time that was talking about a worker-owned cooperative in Central America that was a tile factory, and the workers ended up basically like petitioning the government to buy it from the owners because the owners are mistreating them. That was not the case when I was working at Garrity Tools. It was a really great place to work, and Colin, the owner, was really great at delegating a lot of responsibility, and so we had a lot of say in the like direction of the company. And I think when I read about worker-owned co-ops, I was like, wow, I feel like we're already kind of operating this way, and maybe we could actually convert to that structure. So I tried to learn a little bit more about them so I had a basic understanding. And then sat down and chatted with Colin and said, hey, this is this cool structure. Like, would you be interested in maybe converting the company and selling it to a new ownership of the workers? And luck have it, his brother-in-law had recently become a worker owner at a design firm in Brooklyn, and that company had recently converted to a worker-owned cooperative. And so he was kind of familiar with the concept and also was like excited about it. So from that point, we kind of made a plan that one, we identified me as the person who would lead the conversion. When I brought it to the table, I was like, I'm really excited about this. So like I was working part-time at that point, but I was like, I would love to work full-time and part of my job be to help convert this company. And he was like, cool, let's do it. So a kind of unique situation, but I think that if you work at a company where maybe there is a sole owner, a couple owners who are really excited about the ideas of their workers, that it's definitely feasible for you to talk to those owners and see what they think and see if they can get excited about it. We identified me as the person that was going to lead that. And then we also, at that point, because we were ready to like, okay, let's try to do this, but also we don't know what we're doing. We set up these kind of like bi-weekly meetings with our entire team. So we really wanted to make sure everyone was a part of this, at least the information part of the transition, and we made them optional. So we knew that everyone wasn't initially going to want to become a worker owner, but we put that option out there and invited them to these meetings to learn more about the process and like see if they were interested. So we started doing more research, providing like broad educational materials at those meetings for all of our employees. And then I also started doing one-on-one interviews, reaching out to other co-ops that I thought kind of had similar structures to us to try to learn about how we might structure our co-op. Um, and began to like dig a little bit into like some of the more like legal things, which leads us into the second part, step two, which is our new governance structure. So while we're having fun, like dreaming about, man, what's it going to be like to be a worker-owned cooperative? Like, look at this cool one over here and this cool one over here and all these components they have. We also needed to start kind of getting pen to paper and figuring out really how that was going to work. The biggest thing I would recommend for this step when you're figuring out your new governance structure is to connect with experts. So I'd recommend working with professional CPAs, lawyers, co-op consultants, people that have worked with co-ops before, and can give you advice about how to structure this because you're going to create a new operating agreement for your business that is a legal document. So having a lawyer draft that for you will be great. You'll also be making some decisions about like how you want to be taxed, like how you want to be set up under like your state or federal like tax structures. And so having a CPA can help you make informed decisions about that. You'll also be in that process defining all these structures. So when you're creating your operating agreement, you're going to figure out how your governance works. So how decision making works, how membership, so how someone becomes a worker owner, what are the requirements, and a lot of other specifics. The other thing at this phase I would recommend folks do is to think about this new governance structure and if it would impact your day-to-day operations. This is going to vary widely depending on how your company organization already operates, but thinking about when you transition to a worker-owned co-op and your workers are now the owners, are their roles in operations of the day-to-day going to change? Or is your governance and your operations very separate? Are they overlapping? And trying to get some clarity around that. You might not be able to totally figure it out till you've made that transition and start to work into it, but thinking about it up front can save some bumpy parts later. Next slide. At Garrity Tools. Here's a picture of me in our wood shop being like, I make all the decisions, but not anymore. I never made all the decisions and I didn't want to. So, when we were developing our governance structure, we were thinking about these things. First thing, we got expert help. We got connected with a law clinic at Washington University here in St. Louis, the Entrepreneurship Law Clinic. And I had learned that they were working with co-ops through one of my one-on-one interviews that I did with another co-op here in St. Louis and connected with them. We ended up working with, I think, 3 semesters of their students to finish our operating agreement because it took a long time. But we basically, with their help, went through section by section. That's like of our operating agreement. So how decisions are made, how members are brought on, how members leave, how patronage, so like our profit sharing works. We went through all these nitty-gritty things, and it was great because they really distilled it down. They would come to us and say, how do you want decisions to be made? Here's 3 examples that we've found in other co-op operating agreements. How do these feel? Do we want to find something in the middle? And we had really great discussions with those law students too about like, when we were like, we want to do consensus, they would be like, are you sure? And we would discuss like how that could really play out. And we did end up choosing consensus, but it was a really great way to really think deeply about how our operating agreement should be structured. And for us, we were still a very young company, so had only been operating for like 2, 3 years, and I don't think we had the tools really yet to think about how our operations and our governance were separate because we also were very new to the co-op world. So we were still figuring out how our operations worked, period, how to make more tools, how to sell more tools. And like we had discussions when we were first converting, like, well, do all worker owners like make the same amount of money? And then we're like, well, being a worker owner isn't exactly relate to like what we do day to day. So we started thinking about those things, but we weren't totally clear on it, even by the time we transitioned to a co-op. So we were figuring all this out, but alongside this, sort of parallel to it, we needed to figure out the sales structure and financing. So, in general, what we need to think about in this phase is for the sellers, so the current owner of the business, they need to assess the value of the company and decide on a selling price. If you're a more established company, creating like, or figuring out the value of valuing your company can be a little bit easier. You could work with your accountant or your CPA to figure out, based on your past financial reports, what assets you have, all those things, what the company is worth. For Garrity Tools, again, we were a very young company. We didn't have a great accounting system before we became a co-op, and so it was a little bit more difficult for us to do that. But most companies could probably, get a sense. And you would want to talk to like your current owner would want to talk to an outside source to do that. And then the buyers, so the workers who are going to buy the company, need to figure out how they're going to buy it, where the money is coming from. This could be a loan agreement with the owner, or maybe you're borrowing money. There's some great lenders. There's just a few, but in the US that lend specifically to worker owned co-ops and are really passionate about helping workers get the money that they need to purchase co-op. So we can provide that in our follow-up resources, and they're also on our website and in our co-op handbook. Um, and or maybe you decide like, oh, everyone is going to chip in this amount of money to buy the company. It really, again, depends on your situation, how many people are buying it, what kind of like financial state individuals are in, all of that. And then you're also gonna figure out the structure. So we're talking about, the price, how we're buying it, but there's sort of the legal action that happens when we're actually purchasing it. So working with a lawyer to create those documents that will officially like have the workers buy the company is going to be important too. So at Garrity Tools, here's a picture of Colin in the center. He's got his for sale sign because his company is for sale. And Bree on the left and me on the right are buying that company. And we actually had kind of a unique situation at Garrity Tools. I say it's unique, but honestly, every co-op conversion is unique. But Colin was selling the company, but he was also going to be a part of the new ownership. So he was also one of the initial worker owners. So these three people in the photo are our first worker owners, but also Colin is selling the company. So it was helpful to have our lawyers kind of look at how to structure the sale to make sure that it didn't look like insider trading to the government, like Colin's selling the company to himself. So we'll talk a little bit about that, but. Basically, initially, Colin talked to his own experts and valued the company. So he needed to figure out on his own what the value of the company was. And like I said, we didn't have great financial records. So some of that, when he talked to people, they were like, I don't know, like you could probably just like put a price out there. But he did go through and like value all the assets. We have an asset list of like, well, exactly what we bought. And then he kind of did like the valued the extra stuff, just like the brand itself, potential, future revenue, those things. So he came to us with a number, and we said, okay, that looks good. Then we drafted a loan agreement. So we decided the most straightforward way for the worker owners to purchase the company from the original sole proprietor was to have a loan agreement just directly with him. So we put a 10-year loan in place to pay off. That purchase price. And we had the law clinic at WashU helped us draft that up. And we had the purchase price plus interest. So basically, our loan with Colin, we pay interest on giving him that money over time instead of in one hunk. So very similar maybe to taking a loan out with a lender. We have a little bit of extra money we're paying because we can't pay it all at once. But it was a very good interest rate. So we also, in terms of structuring our sale, the lawyers ended up advising that we create a new LLC to purchase the company instead of just us as individuals, because again, Colin was one of those individuals buying the company from himself. Having an entity instead purchase the company would help really clarify and sort of paper, as the lawyers like to say to us, how that worked. So Colin, Bree, and I created a new LLC with Missouri called Garrity Tools Co-op. And then when we went to purchase the company from Colin, Garrity Tools Co-op purchased the company from Colin. And so then we merged those companies together, and Garrity Tools, the original company, was the remaining one. So when they merged, basically Garrity Tools Co-op kind of went away. Another reason that we did this is very specific, but we wanted to keep our EIN, so our government employer identification number. We had payroll and everything already set up with that at Garrity Tools. And if we purchased the company and had a new company formed or a new co-op company formed, we would get a new EIN. We just wanted to save some of our back end like paperwork and keep our bookkeeping. So doing that merger allowed us to retain our original EIN. And those are things that I would have had no idea how to do if we weren't working with a lawyer. It was very helpful for them to not only explain this process to us in really simple terms, but also put all these documents together that outlined them in kind of intense legal terms. Okay, step 4, big one, make it official. Um, This is where you've got your operating agreement ready, you've got your sales structure, you know exactly how it's going to go, you've got your money to pay, and you're going to execute this. So you're going to work with your lawyers to execute the sale and purchase of the company, and you sign and submit lots of paperwork to the government. I remember sitting at my computer. And getting, okay, now you sign this, now you sign this. For us, particularly because of this merger, but this could be something as simple as sitting at a table with your lawyer, signing those few docs, and success. Again, it just depends on the kind of sale that you end up structuring. The other thing that's really important in this step, and something that, often in the hubbub of getting something done, we forget, but to celebrate the achievement. So make sure that you take time to commemorate the occasion and also thank everyone that helped you along the way. There will be hopefully lots of people that are helping you, your lawyers, CPA, your local co-op consultant like Co-op STL, and even other folks that you're talking to within larger co-op networks. Particularly within the co-op community, we love to see new co-ops happen. So if there's anyone that you talk to along the way to like get insight, letting them know when it happens, they're going to be super pumped. So sharing that information is going to be really great. And not only with the people that helped you, but I didn't put this in here, but publicly as well. So if you have a presence on social media, if you have a mailing list, depending on the type of business that you are, letting the public know that you're now a worker-owned co-op can be really exciting. Now we'll go to the next slide. So at Garrity Tools, we had a day at our office where we were signing a bunch of paperwork. That was to create our new co-op and buy the company. And then there was another day where we finally like merged the companies. So there were a couple different occasions that we were celebrating. And honestly, the first time we were like, we did it. And our lawyer was like, actually, it's not done yet. And we were like, wait, what? So we still, even at the end, were like, I think we get it. And then we were like, wait, what? So now we have to do the merger and the, okay. And this is again why lawyers are great to have for this process. But we got to celebrate twice because of that, which was fun. Um, the other thing that we did, so when we became our co-op and we purchased the company, our initial 3 worker owners, so Colin, Bree, and myself, we paid our initial capital contributions. That was one of the things we decided that was a requirement for becoming a worker owner was buying into the company. So we have a pretty low capital contribution. It's just over $2,000, but each of us wrote our initial checks and handed them over. And those were the first deposits that we made into our bank account as a new worker-owned co-op. We also took time to just celebrate with the whole team and kind of commemorate that big occasion. All right, continue the work. Uh, so you've become a worker-owned co-op. It is not, it's just the beginning, really. Um, One important thing is to learn. So to continue to find like new training opportunities for worker owners in your whole team and educate non-worker owners on their pathway. So maybe not everyone becomes a worker owner when you first convert to a co-op, or you're hiring new people and they're not eligible yet to be a worker owner. So, incorporating constant education into your workplace is really great to encourage new worker owners to join. But also, there's constantly evolving information out there about co-ops, whether that's like the tax code being updated or new ideas for how to structure your decision-making process. So staying plugged in. And that can really help if even just that learning aspect, if you're staying connected. So once you become a co-op, continuing to like grow your relationships with other co-ops, either locally, but also national networks like the U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives. You can become a member there, and then you're really staying a little bit more in touch with what is going on in national trends with worker co-ops, but also like being able to just connect and get inspiration and ideas from other cooperatives too. They have great kind of I'm trying to think of what they are, just like email listservs. So there's one for like operations or sort of like the HR side of co-ops, which I'm a part of, and I get emails that are like, does anyone have a good example of like a time off policy? And then all these co-ops start sharing all their time off policies. So connecting to those can really help continue to evolve how your co-op operates and governs. And then the other thing to be open to, and I think one of the things I've learned most working at a worker-owned cooperative is that things will change. When you set your operating agreement, when you start to work as a cooperative, continuing to revise what you've put in place is going to be really essential to be able to respond to what's going on in the cooperative. And again, with all these kind of learning opportunities, connections to other people, hopefully you can continue to create even better like policies, and even maybe like decision-making processes. So, Garrity Tools. After we became a co-op, we had a little bit of a bumpy start. As I mentioned in our sort of like operations or like our defining our governance structure phase, we didn't really get to the point of very clearly defining governance versus operations. And over the first kind of like 6 months of operating as a co-op, we realized that that was something we needed to really pull apart and figure out. And then we also, purchasing a company from the original founder and having that founder as a part of our new ownership group was really awesome. But it also, we became aware of just like this sort of not just from the original owner, but from the employees that transitioned too. We have all these different like webs of relationships in our workplace that were needing to just be untangled a little bit. So in that first year, because of these sort of like things that were coming up, we redefined our pay structure. And that helped us define our operations a little bit clearer too, to really pull apart. This is governance when you're a worker owner. These are the things you do, but our day-to-day operations are very separate from that. And we have a very clear pay structure. If you're a worker owner, that doesn't have any sort of bearing on your pay. Being a worker owner means that you get the benefit of sharing profits and making decisions about the company, but your day-to-day operations role, we have a very clear pay structure in place. When we were trying to work through that, that was also really hard. We had a really tough time talking about like what we should be paid, the money. And so we actually worked with the U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives to get a consultant to come in and help us define and build that new pay structure and also think about pulling apart our governance and operations. So we're still calling on those experts. It wasn't just at the beginning when we were trying to figure out how to become a co-op. It's working at being a co-op was really helpful too. We also created a Darcy document, which helps define who is responsible. The words are, I always blank on this. I can't remember what the D is right now. If anyone knows, remind me, but it's
Decision
accountable,
maker.
responsible. What was it?
Decision maker.
Decision maker, accountable, responsible, um, mm,
Consultant.
consulted and informed. Thank you, Zandi. We use this document all the time at work. Um, but we basically use this system to better clarify everyone's roles within our operations, and that also helped us continue to like operate smoother and with more trust and transparency as a worker-owned co-op. The other thing that we did was clarified our roles like outside of work. So because Colin was the sole owner of Garrity Tools, we purchased it from him, but we were operating in a building that he owned. So we were like, oh, we should actually like put a lease in place. We didn't need that before because you own the building, you own the company. We put a lease in place. We made clear like what we could use in the building. We made clear what his role was as landlord, and it made it easier that like when something happened in the building, we would be like, "Oh, we need to email Colin landlord." I'm not just going to walk up to him at work and be like, "Hey, you need to fix the so and so." So just pulling apart again, sort of untangling some of these relationships in our workplace took some time, but it was really worth that first year, I think, of that kind of difficult, like interpersonal work to get to where we're at now. Because in our second year, it was our most profitable year ever as a company. We saw a lot of that hard work pay off. And while it's not like the co-op work we were doing was directly affecting sales of pottery tools, right? Those aren't totally connected. But I think all of us being more invested in the company, figuring out these really important things like how our operations work probably we wouldn't have put as much thought into if we weren't all owners of this business. So we had a really great year in year two. And then in year three was the first year we had new worker owners. So for the first couple years, it was Pam and or Pam's new. It was Colin and Bree and I. And then Pam applied and joined in year three, and also Bose, one of our production associates. So now we've also, over that time, grown our company. So we have 8 employees now. When we became a worker-owned co-op, we had, I think 5, but one person was part-time. So now we have 8 employees. 5 of those are worker owners. One of our other employees just became eligible, and then the other 2 employees aren't eligible yet. So we've been growing our worker ownership, which is really exciting too, because it means that just like those benefits that we pointed out earlier, we're going to have new perspectives in our governance and be able to make even better informed decisions about sort of the trajectory and where we want to go with the company. Next slide. Okay, we're going to take a moment. See if folks want to type in the chat or share aloud. Something that you learned would be great. Maybe one thing that you learned, and maybe if there's anything that you want to know more about now that you've gotten a little more information about how to convert a company to a co-op. And my continual disclaimer would be, I'm presenting this information through the lens of the work that we did at Garrity Tools becoming a co-op. So a lot of my experience is based on our company, the size of our company, all those things. And while these steps I think apply everywhere, there's, yeah, a lot of details that you might come across that were not brought up in this presentation. So definitely if there's other things that you want to know more about, reaching out to us at Co-op STL, other co-op cooperators like the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops, and other regions also have sort of co-op builders. So there's other great resources out there too.
I think one thing, I mean, even though we chat all the time, that was new, was thinking about the idea of Colin being both the seller and the purchaser and like the importance of layers in navigating that whole process. I think that was really interesting.
Yeah, and sometimes we'll, like we were saying before, like one of the benefits can be like, oh, you can, retire and sell your company. And I think that's something that in the co-op world is like presented a lot, but there's definitely instances where a business already exists and the owner doesn't want to not be an owner anymore, but maybe just an owner under a new structure. And yeah, it was kind of like funky to think about. And the lawyers were even like, how do we do this? Like, right. And they also were like, we could do this 5 different ways. We chose this way. And we were like, okay, cool. Cool. You can go to the next
That's,
slide.
something to keep in mind. Oh, I was just thinking like based on
Yeah.
that example that, it's important to keep in mind what differences in, status or, like in the case of the previous owner, like how do you navigate and how do you create that environment where you're working as collectively as equals?
hmm Yeah. And some of that, like, I think like it's called founders syndrome is the way it's
Mhm.
referred to a lot in the co-op world, where
I
if
didn't
the
know
founder
that.
is still involved. And I will say like that, like, like wasn't much of the issue with our bumpy start at
Mhm.
all. Colin was really excited about being a co-op and like not being in charge, you know. But some of it was just like learning new ways to operate kind of for all of us. But yeah, I think that that founder syndrome is definitely something that's talked aloud about a lot in the co-op world.
Yeah, did it help to
You
be
still
at,
you still default like looking to the previous owner, like what should we do? And it's like,
yeah.
no, everyone's making the decision now. And Colin
Yeah.
was like, great, you guys, what do you think? Like,
Yeah, but that took practice. I mean, did it help to like formalize stuff as much as possible, like write everything down and try to create the concrete processes?
yeah, definitely. We got into like the Darcy document really helped having really clear job descriptions. A lot of our clarifying our operations helped make sure that when we were operating, we all knew exactly what we were doing. And then our operating agreement for our governance. So when we met as worker owners, those decisions were very separate and clear from that. But we've recently gotten into SOPs. Pam's working on one now. So our standard operating procedures, as our ownership has grown and our staff has grown, we're putting some together to put like financial checks and balances in place and things like that. So it continues to evolve and get even more clear. Cool. So yeah, we wanted to leave a little bit of time for questions and any other conversation. Um, I know Pam is not mic'd, so Pam, if you have any questions, pop it in the chat. Um, Zandi and Chris too. Uh, I know we've worked on this presentation together, but I just talked through the whole, conversion of Garrity Tools. If there's anything that you have more detailed questions about, ask for sure.
Yeah, I'm wondering if you had clarified this already, but like what kind of financing, like what kind of loans did you guys take out to affect the purchase?
We ended up just doing a loan with Colin. So the lawyers
Okay,
drafted up a
that's
loan
right.
between, yeah, the co-op and Colin, which has worked well. But at the time, I think if we had known, we didn't know about, we basically knew we couldn't go to a traditional bank. So when a co-op tries to work with a traditional bank, they're going to ask for personal assets to be put up to like secure the loan. And particularly with co-ops, this is an issue because one, the ownership can change often, like people are added. We also don't want to put our individual, like our owners like wealth at risk for the business. It's not really like the co-op way. So we knew that that wasn't an option, but we didn't know about some of these co-op lenders at the time. So we might have like gone that route if we had been tapped into those resources. But yeah, in the end, it was just because I'm sure, I don't know, I don't know, but I wonder if Colin had had the option to just have the lump sum at that time, that might
Yeah.
have been nice. He would have gotten the money and then we would have had the loan with the co-op lender. But yeah, so we just still write a check to Colin every month,
Yeah, and that's
slowly but
probably
surely.
the thing that I hear the most in terms of like what's the actual barriers to formalizing the co-op relationship is usually the terms of a loan and maybe it precludes for a period of time formal ownership between all the different workers.
Hmm.
And Pam has a
Yeah, we
question.
made it. We made the decision that was like brought up, and I think also because Colin was part of the new ownership and was really
Mhm.
excited and on board with the co-op thing. He was like, yeah, we didn't have any sort of contingencies on it. It was like once the loan is signed, the new worker owners own 100% of the company, which was
Cool.
nice and it made it a
Yeah.
lot clearer for us.
The question in the chat is, does anyone have experience with hesitant owners and or employees who have voiced specific concerns? Wondering what people are saying about what's stopping them from initiating this process. Since after all, one could go through all the pre-work, but decide that ultimately it's a no-go.
Mhm. Yeah, I don't have like direct experience with this, but I know a couple, like it's come up with a couple other like St. Louis, like local St. Louis companies where I've talked with folks and they've been like, "Oh yeah, like I've been thinking about that too." And I haven't gotten and then it doesn't happen. But I haven't gotten a super clear sense of why it didn't. But sometimes I think uh, there it is, I will say it is a lot of work. Not only to convert to a co-op, but then to operate as one. It makes your business very much more human, in a great way, but in a way that takes some more work and effort. So I think there was a company I was talking to that had been interested, but I think in the end, I talked to one of the employees and they were saying like, oh, they had talked to some other co-ops and like it just didn't the current owner was just like, this just seems like too much for right now. And like in Garrity Tools situation, like it was really helpful to have um, a dedicated employee to work on that. And I think that is also kind of unique because that was part of like my paid job before we converted to a co-op. And that can take some of that pressure off to be like, we have someone who's working on this and kind of helping move it along. Um, and Yeah, I don't know. Do Chris and Zandi, do y'all have any thoughts of
Yeah, I mean, I think
direct experience that has hesitancies?
there are a couple. One is going back to the financing structure with the loans. Like there might be some existing loans that rely on like the single owner's collateral. And while there are mechanisms to be able to transfer those loans out from the single proprietor, it even adds more to the work of making that conversion. And so there can be just in the way that our legal structures aren't and financial structures aren't necessarily built for cooperatives. It can just be more work to get over some of those hurdles sometimes in a way that maybe folks don't see as valuable enough. Um, and then I think going back to what Jenny said about founder syndrome, I think the other side of that, right, is like there's the founder syndrome of maybe a founder not wanting to give up power, but there's also the learning the dynamics of like being able to take power from the founder. And so sometimes there can be struggles as folks who are coming into that worker owner role from the worker role may not have fully grasped what it means to take full ownership of the company. And that can sometimes be a struggle as well.
Yeah, I have one particular example I'm thinking of. I used to subscribe to a magazine that was supposed to be on track to become a cooperative. And the problem was that the founder, ultimately didn't want to give up ownership or, either like actual like operational ownership or like emotional ownership. It turns out they didn't share values as much as they thought they did. So, at one point, like the founder of the magazine just kind of fired all of the writers in that instance. So, I mean, in that case, it was just like, well, they didn't agree on the owner wasn't, the founder wasn't it wasn't owned by it because it was technically a nonprofit, but they were the editor,
Mm.
and kind of the founder of the magazine, in which case, like, they didn't agree on the values as much as they had thought and hoped. I guess that's the thing, like really interrogating, are you ready for this? Is important to go through it. Like, are people willing to share power? Because ultimately that's going to be necessary for it to work.
And I think that's a big part of the pre-work too, that like it's not just like learning about co-ops, but it's also really taking that time to do some work to shift how you think about work, how you think about ownership, and trying to kind of like bringing along everyone there as well. Um, and also like learning like even basic skills like conflict resolution, like doing trainings like that and stuff like that, I
Yeah.
think can just help prepare people. And not only after the co-op is formed, but like trying that stuff prior to it to see like is this group of people gonna work together? Because you're gonna have to do like some hard work together. So that's also a part of the pre-work that I think can help uh get through some of those concerns and maybe identify that this actually isn't like the best group to maybe become a worker-owned co-op. But other times you'll get through it and it'll be great.
Yeah. I mean, I think ultimately, like running a co-op is a practice of living your values. And, we're all flawed human beings. And so we don't always live our values. So that's really just the thing you figure out along the way. I guess like probably the other like most common blockage is finance of some kind. Either they're unable to raise the finances for it, or there's a question of like how much risk does each worker take in the purchase? Like how much debt is each worker going to be going to be responsible for? That's to make up the money that's gonna purchase the company.
A follow-up in the chat is, do you think people are afraid of that degree of vulnerability? The idea of too much work or risking wasted money? I think, Chris, you kind of touched on that. And
Oh
then
yeah.
I do think that like there is extra work in the work of creating the co-op, but also just like governing something does take work. And so that can also be a barrier as like you negotiate specifically in maybe more traditional industries where you're making something, like governing does probably add to your workload. And so it's making sure like does the profit share and the ability to make decisions about your work, does that balance the extra work you're doing in making those decisions and navigating that governance piece.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
I'll
I
say
think
too, like, oh, when like Garrity Tools was making that transition, what made it a little bit easier for us was that like in terms of like the idea of it being too much work or wasted money, like was that we were in a position where we were like doing really well as a company financially. And so I think it was easier for us to take the risk of like spending money on my work to like try to make that transition, but also like we were trying to figure out how to meet demand and had a sense that if we could build better structures for the company, we could do that. And if we had more input in doing that, it would all go better. So there was like a little bit more incentive. And that's not to say that your company has to be like super profitable to make a transition to a worker cooperative. I would also argue that like if it's not super profitable, maybe becoming a worker cooperative could help you like stabilize and increase your business. But I think that question of yeah, like is it too much work or risking wasted money, like wasn't as much on the table because we were like, yeah, in a good position and made it easier to be like, this would be a fun project in addition to the work that we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's understandable. I mean, especially with like there's so many stressors out there. I might think like, oh, I don't need this authority. I don't need this responsibility. But I think most of the time you could probably think of like, man, it would have been this part of my job would be better if I had a hand in making that decision. And if my particular experience was part of that. And I think ultimately, like usually a cooperative will have some employees, if only just because like if they're new, there's usually some kind of probationary period. There's some kind of criteria, whether it's a capital contribution or maybe working there a certain period of time. So you might strive for 100% worker owners, but probably at different times you'll have some percentage of employees, and part of it is making the case that I think your life is going to be better taking charge along with the rest of us. That everyone is going to feel better and work better together when we are worker owners rather than a traditional like employer employee relationship.
And then another question in the chat, have y'all found that as St. Louis, Cooperation St. Louis grows, people are more willing to engage in conversation about co-op conversions in St. Louis specifically?
I feel like my I, I feel like people are excited about engaging in conversations about co-ops, but it maybe isn't, I don't think it's in relation to co-op STL. I think it's in relation to our like current climate in the US. Like I think when you can communicate the benefits of it and like the way that you can operate your company to align with values that, you know, value the people that work there, the environment, your community, and that this structure like kind of checks all those boxes, it's a really great sort of small revolt to what is going on at a larger scale. And I feel like that is where I've been able to really connect with people and talking about co-ops. Um, but I'm hoping that even just like I also feel like a lot of times it's like the seed of something. Like if I go to a lot of small businesses, and if there's a chance, I will I will be like, have you heard of work owned co-ops? Have you guys ever thought about that? So the more sort of there's three of us as co-op STL, but there's people in this workshop tonight. And even just like the more I think not only co-op STL, but the more co-ops there are, that will continue to spread and share. And we'll also see a lot of different ways that co-ops can convert or form and operate that will help kind of just build this ecosystem overall.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I think one of the main reasons we started this in the first place is because, like, you would think this wouldn't be an idea that needs that much selling, but like, it's something that people genuinely hadn't even considered was an option before. And like, only just maybe this is and quite frequently, this is the first time when I'm talking about what we're doing at Co-op STL, that this is the first time they've thought of the idea of worker co-ops or even any kind of co-op. Um, even though they may actually interact with co-ops that they without realizing it, like it's not a new idea, but it is one that is like true economic democracy is very alien to our everyday experience. And so we often don't even have like, and I think just like the same with that, inviting people to become worker co-ops, worker owners, is building the confidence. Oh, you can actually make these decisions. You're not stupid. You can actually apply your experience and your skills in ways that you have genuine choices about how you interact with the economy and with your job. So I think that's it. Really, just it's something that needs spreading, even though it makes intuitive sense to most people of a co-op and how a co-op works. But it is still something you have to get in front of them because people are generally not incentivized to think about it that way.
We've got our workbook. We
Hmm?
kind of dropped the information about our workbook throughout the workshop, but it's digital on our website. You can check it out. This is a great that sort of like pre-work and thinking about your governance structure. There's activities throughout this workshop that kind of guide you through that process. So if you wanna, it could be a great place to start just to see if it feels like a good fit for what your business does. So definitely check it out. And then we've also got a couple. Oh, it's Zandi.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in addition to the workbook. If you are, you look through our workbook, you're starting to think about this, you want more help in thinking about the membership, what the financing or the, sharing patronage could look like, what it could mean to have decision making. We are here. We want to be a resource to you. We have some consulting, and so we can be a thought partner as you start thinking about what you might want to bring to a lawyer or an accountant as you approach those professionals. But the workbook is a great place to dip your toes into this conversation.
And then we do have programs throughout this year. I think we've got something almost every month, but our next program is going to be a co-op talk. So Chris had mentioned these at the beginning of the session. And basically, these workshops are almost like an office hours. We kind of go over the big picture of the topic. And then if you sign up for the workshop prior to, we'll ask if you have any specific questions. So we'll get a lot of workshops where like the won't do, we won't get into specifics. These are like we will get into specifics about your scenario. So if you have questions about finances at co-ops or how patronage works, that profit sharing structure that co-ops use, whether you have a co-op that you're operating in or you're just thinking about starting one, this is a great time to come with questions and have a few folks in the room that can help respond and get you thinking about stuff. So that'll be on May 6th and it'll be virtual. And we'll pop a link in the chat. Um, for where folks can sign up for that. You can always check out our website, stl.coop, and the upcoming workshops tab will have all these listed as well. But yeah, I think that's it for tonight, unless we have any final questions or thoughts.
Just
Thank you,
one
Pam, for
last
being with us tonight.
Yeah, thank you for coming on with us. The last thing I would add is if this is the first time you're hearing about this and you want to get back to the beginning and go, this is all brand new. We do have our intro to co-op workshops. We did one earlier this year. We are going to do it at least once more this year. So that's on our YouTube, but we're also going to do that workshop again later on.